Hey everybody. So to introduce myself real quick, I'm Julian, the General Manager of Singular in EMEA, currently setting up the Berlin office. Before I worked a couple of years for Tune, also setting up the European entity and the European business, and I know the user acquisition field for quite a while, and especially when it comes to analytics and data. No news for me anymore.
Okay.
Hello? No, good.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Eric. I run Heracles, which is a consultancy, mostly doing analytics and marketing strategy. And I also run the website Mobile Dev Memo. And I'm also building a platform for mobile user acquisition called Agamemnon.
Hi everyone, I'm Max, ZeptoLab. So I'm running the product side and the user acquisition side in ZeptoLab.
Working? Yes. Hi. Daniel from AppsFlyer, just an average guy that works for an amazing attribution and analytics company. For those that aren't familiar, just quickly, we're helping game developers, but also anyone that has an app to measure all their app installs, measure engagement, LTV, and ROI. That's it.
Cool. Yeah, so basically what we'll do here on the panel is we'll talk about like developments, recent developments, past developments in a very general way, but also in more specific ways. So the basic structure will be that first of all, we just discuss more like the theory. So basically laying the groundwork in order to then go into more specific areas. And then basically talking about sometimes very specific games, in other cases just about verticals and what kind of like the leaders in a given vertical make different than anyone else. And obviously then we'll have the possibility to open up to the audience to basically address like all the questions you guys have. Because we literally, as I mentioned at the very beginning, we have people here on the panel that are in the industry from the very beginning. And that's a great way to really utilize the knowledge that we have right in front of you guys. Great, so in order to prove that, we start in a very, very general way. So basically talking about like where we are in the App Store nowadays and what has changed over time in the context of where we are today and what makes basically UA monetization strategies really unique.
So what changed over the last years when it comes to user acquisition? I believe from all the experience that I have and talking to many of the largest advertisers in the world, it shifts more into a quality direction, right? In former times, people really tried to get as many users as possible to rank high in the app stores, but now it's really more about what's coming after the install. Get all granular data, get all the details to really boost your revenue, boost retention, and therefore be more successful in the long run and not just on the short term when it comes to downloads and installs.
All right. Yeah, Max, so basically ZeptoLab is obviously a company that is around for a long time. I think you've literally, like, you're one of the examples of being like a kind of like first generation App Store success, and also with the more recent games, you basically deployed like more up-to-date strategy. So therefore, I'm definitely interested in your opinion on the topic.
Yeah, so first of all, I would totally agree with Julian. So like from my perspective, it goes from quantity to quality a lot, and the market is changing. So I mean, like in every conference, every month, like all the people saying, okay, CPIs are growing like crazy, and you should do something about it. So from my point of view, the current state of the market is like you should do some kind of unique product, the product that sells itself, and only if you do that, you can afford like running profitable UA campaigns. So this is how I see it, and I think this is how it goes, and this is where the whole market is going. So it's more about, like, from my point of view, it's more about the product itself than it just about UA stuff.
So, and since I know that AppsFlyer was one of the markets to really go like into Asia and APAC very early in the game, I'm specifically interested if you see specific differences between like the different geographies and and how the different, like if you, in a very broad spectrum, east-west, if you see dramatic differences that have appeared over the time.
So firstly, before getting to the East v West, I think When we talk about focusing more on quality as opposed to quantity, that's a function of, I believe, using data in a much richer way than what advertisers were doing before. So it's everything coming together with an advancement of capabilities in mobile marketing. Much more focus on granular data and real performance marketing. And then when we look at East v West, can really dissect this in a number of ways. What we're seeing in the last year is, firstly, China in specific is massive. There are some of the biggest gaming companies in the world out of there. But we're also seeing a lot of Western gaming companies looking to break into China now and start to monetize there. We actually, or our marketing team actually released a report not too long ago about the state of in-app purchase and spending. And it shows some really good insights into, focus on gaming as a vertical. On average, how much users are paying and what's the average revenue per user between iOS and Android, where advertisers should really focus their efforts. And with regards to gaming, if we just compare that to something like retail, for example, the behavior of users is very different, right? So less people purchase, but it's a very high focus on the whales, the people that purchase a lot. And that drives also what you try to do on the product side.
So, Eric, I know that you have like a very interesting perspective on how difficult and how, let's say, how difficult it is nowadays to actually become like one of the top players. And therefore, if you can get that also, put that into the context as well, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. I think the biggest difference from being now as a consultant, I see like a ton of different developers on like a monthly basis, so I kind of see the whole range of approaches. And what's different to me now, as opposed to like 3 years ago maybe, is the sort of level of like strategic sophistication that goes into approaching UA. So I think like maybe 3 years ago, like having a UA strategy meant just like putting into place like the sort of tech stack that you needed, right? So like what our competitive advantage is in doing UA is that we have all the components that we need. And so we can operate across multiple different networks and sort of diversify the traffic that we're getting. And that was like 3 years ago. Now there's like a level of strategic abstraction above that, right? So it's like, okay, actually, what do we do to get a competitive advantage? Because that other stuff, just diversifying the traffic sources, is kind of like par for the course. That's like the minimum thing you need to do, just to sort of, it's table stakes, just sort of compete, right? So now there's kind of the two, like if you had kind of the two different like sort of like holistic strategies. The one is, okay, we're going to bring like some brand recognition into our some IP brand recognition into our product and reduce CPIs that way. And the other is we're going to build out like a really technologically sophisticated operation that employs like a large number of people and uses like cutting edge tools. And so that to me is like the difference. That table stakes created the situation where like either we reduce CPIs just by recognition, and that was when I was working at Rovio before I was doing this, and that's what we had. We didn't have a really technologically sophisticated setup, and we didn't have a big team, but we still got really low install prices because the Angry Birds brand offset that, and we were able to penetrate the sort of cacophony of demands on people's attention that way. And you look at some big companies, and they basically employ traders. That's what they do. They have what amounts to like a hedge fund staff doing arbitrage trading, like 50 people even in some cases. And those people would be working on Wall Street, but mobile user acquisition pays almost as much, and then they have a better lifestyle doing that.
Okay, but like if we already talk about structures, team structures, like especially if you have a team of 50 people basically just like doing arbitrage buying, how is that actually like divided, how the responsibility is divided, and basically to really execute on that purpose?
Yeah, so I wrote an article yesterday where I was talking about how I think, if you look at user acquisition sort of like as a function, and not diving into the specific roles that exist within that team, but just in general, that function is kind of combination of 3 skill sets: is data analysis, reporting, and campaign management. And so in that situation where you have like the team of arbitrage traders, Those people would be sort of segmented into roles that are like very specific to like one thing, right? So you'd have the analysts who are basically taking data and pulling insights out of that to give to the traders. The traders are basically the campaign managers who are taking info from here and putting it into here, right? I get an output from this analytics system, and I have an input mechanism, which is the bidding interface to the network. And then you have the reporting people, or the people who are basically just creating the infrastructure to surface all of that up and down, right? To surface it up to the execs, so they're saying, hey, we're spending money profitably. Here's more budget, and surface it down to basically everybody on the front lines.
Great.
Doing all of that.
So I know that you guys basically applied both strategies for some time, right? So if you can share some insights, would be great.
Yeah, so I would agree with Eric. So we've been experimenting a lot with with the structure of UA teams and what's the best approach to do it, and then finally got to the same structure. So we have like UA buying managers, like UA managers who operate in all this stuff, who running the campaigns and stuff like that, and like each manager is working on different sources, and we also have like dedicated analysts for each UA manager who actually evaluating the quality and giving like some kind of feedback. And we also have like a very strong data scientists team of data scientists, like data guys, who are much more about like prediction the quality in the long term, and making the scenes work like in the shortest possible perspective. So like now we get into the point when we evaluate and estimating the quality of traffic and for the first couple of days before, after we get it. So yeah, I would like, from my point of view, it's like optimal structure for the team.
But I know that you also played, like you literally tried, or you're still in the process of applying or building up the brand around especially the character Omnom, right? So for Cut the Rope, do you see any insights you can share about like building out the brand on your own and basically like utilizing even comics, right? Comics, specific YouTube episodes. It's all the stuff you've tried in order to build out the brand. Did it have like any measurable impact on like the other channels as well? Is it something like any kind of bridge you can build there?
Well, that's a really good question, and like not the easiest one I ever heard. Well, yeah. So Omnom brand and Kadro brand is kind of not like so it's kind of mature. So it's on the market for 6 years already, and we've been working on it and we've been developing it for all this time. And yeah, so we started with a game. After that, we added some kind of video content. Then like a new type of games like Tamagotchi game and stuff like that, and also merchandise, licensing, and all this stuff. The things we see from numbers perspective, from the like UA perspective, is that when we so actually we had some experiments with adding Omnom to new type of games. So that's actually what Rovio done a lot in the past. So, and the thing I could say is like it's definitely decreasing your CPIs and all the stuff like dramatically. So, but on the other hand, it's very tough challenge to like if you take Omnom, or I think it's more or less the same with Angry Birds, monetizing this kid's character is always like a tricky question.
Okay. Since Eric mentioned before that basically like the infrastructure nowadays is kind of like everyone has it in place, but at least I still see plenty often that there are challenges in combining different infrastructures. So based on your perspective and being like basically one of the hubs in like around UA, how do you see basically like which systems do you see, like how do you describe a up-to-date UA stack basically?
For me also, just because we usually come at the beginning of the tech stack and less at the end, but generally when we're talking about theory and practice and the different approaches available, it really depends on each company and where they're at and capabilities. You know, if you don't have a team of 50 scientists or data scientists to go through the data, then you're obviously gonna be setting up in a different way. But on a very base level, we talk about attribution, identifying where the users are coming from and how they're discovering the app, and measuring where to spend marketing budget. We're talking about customer segmentation and re-engagement capabilities, so you know, the ability to send push notifications, and also get more deeper insights onto the product side, how users are engaging, and A/B testing on that side. So that's also the A/B testing tools. I think, you know, on a base side, as a starting out, that's, you know, how I would see it. And you know, learning to leverage the data smartly to really have as many insights as possible when actually turning on the tap and spending the money. That's when starting out. And I think maybe Eric might see some other technologies or you know, platforms that he recommends to companies that he's working with who are setting up and getting going.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Whoa. What percentage of your new clients, right? So you're getting new business, the client's totally new to you. What percentage of those clients are onboarding an attribution system for the first time versus being poached from a different attribution company?
Difficult to give a percentage. I think it's also different by vertical. So gaming, I think, you know, as generally the most advanced vertical of mobile marketers, everyone pretty much knows straight away that they need attribution. If you're talking about other verticals with companies that are more traditional, less mobile first with a focus, then it's more about discovery of what technologies they need to use. I would assume, again, no numbers, didn't come prepared for that. But you know, in the most cases, there are more new mobile marketers coming that need attribution. There are, of course, those that are switching from one vendor to another, but volume-wise, a lot less than those that are new.
But those total newbies, I guess, wouldn't be super valuable in the short term, right? Because if they're coming to you and be like, "What's attribute?" You know, they're not going to have big budgets to spend. From my perspective, it's a total war zone.
I mean, firstly, it is a war zone. You know, there's no denying that, but it's a fun battle. But there are newbies that are mobile-first companies that get huge investments, and they know straight away that they got to go and spend money. And when that's their situation, they're a new company that's very relevant in terms of spending a lot of money on acquiring users, and they need our technology.
It must be a fun war to fight because the battlefield is you know, Michelin-grade restaurants and bars, right? Because that's where you're winning the new clients over. Why don't I ever get taken out?
So Eric, where is this heading?
You know, all the clients come to me and ask which attribution partners they should be working with. I should be getting
so
taken
basically,
out.
who invites you for the best restaurant, or what?
Yeah, but I'm Switzerland. I stay neutral.
Do you have any plans for tonight, Eric?
That's actually, personally, that's not how I do it. I prefer to focus on delivering the value on the business side as opposed to a nice meal. A nice meal comes along the way.
Why
right?
can't it be both?
It can.
I do my best business evaluation when I'm full and kind of tipsy.
Yeah, you're famous for that, right?
Dinner tonight, Eric.
So, like, he's also a stand-up comedian, and so that's like something. Maybe you have the pleasure of seeing him, like, at some point, also drunk being a stand-up comedian. But like, it's especially you guys. So basically, now we have the stack. So where do you come in? And also, like, are you more on the side of like the 50 plus teams, and then you provide some additional advantages, or is it more like the small team where you guys can really create a lot of value?
Both. So a lot of advertisers, and especially gaming companies, are talking to me, and the biggest difficulty that they are having nowadays is that they work together with many point solutions in the market, right? So they have an attribution provider, they have Google Analytics, they work with maybe 10, 20, even more ad networks together, so they have the cost data on the one side, attribution data on the other side, in-app data somewhere else. So it's getting messy. And you can either manage it with an own BI system, then you talk more to the bigger companies out there, but even for those guys it's difficult to maintain all the different APIs to really plug in all the data. And that's where we can help again.
Makes
And
sense.
for the smaller ones, they are also using, or they want to use different data collectors, but they only want to work with one dashboard. That's also where we are coming in. So there's not really like, it's not a question if it's a big company or a small company. It's really like, you want to have the best point solutions, but you still would like to use one dashboard and get everything centralized together, because it makes your life more easy,
Sure.
it automates more, and helps you to make the better decisions for user acquisition.
Cool. All right, so I'd like to basically take the like what we discussed so far, and also now go in like in a slightly but also very related area, which is everything around monetization. So I think there are always like two different aspects of it. So on the one side, monetization strategies have dramatically changed and also are more, let's say, diverse nowadays. So basically, I'm definitely interested in developing a better like understanding what kind of like really cool monetization strategies you see out there, as in specific things that kind of like stand out and have, for example, like great impact on the LTV. And on the other side, also if there are specific things you can share around the ad monetization. But I'll just start out on the events, the monetization events, etc. Is there something you specifically see, Eric, that you consider to be very exciting, and you can also apply it like to different of your customers?
Yeah, I think exciting / interesting to me is the kind of evolution of the ad monetization economy. So you know, it's very interesting, partly because just the sort of like you know, interrelated complexities with the IAP economy, you know, that arise when you start thinking about, okay, how do we do a rewarded video, and how does that what kind of rewards do we use, and how does that impact the kind of soft currency you know, amounts that people sort of accrue, and then how do we balance that against, you know, making people do IPs and stuff. But it's also really interesting because I think that ties very much into the type of game you make, right? So I think to have a game that, so I think the deeper into gameplay you go, and the sort of like more depth you add to the economy and the overall experience, the harder it is to convey what the game's about in an ad, and so the more expensive it is to market. And the less likely it is to be viral, right? Because I think if you have a game, you know, that's basically takes either like introduction from a friend, which is like kind of a guild system strategy of acquiring new users, or like a long kind of multiple session arc to figure out what the core of what you're doing is, which is mostly like the sort of like what you call core games or like city builders and stuff. Then you can't really convey that in an ad, and so you're going to have a lot of drop off, and you're going to have a lot of drop off at the App Store page, and you're going to have a lot of churn out in day one if the ads aren't targeted. I mean, you can always balance this with targeting of ads and stuff, but so that stuff is really hard to market, right? And so you're just going to sort of by definition have a generally lower DAU base, and so it's not really monetizable via ads. The opposite side of that is the games that are very, very easy to convey in a picture. And so you get high virality because you get people sharing like screenshots and stuff, or just showing their friends, or actually you know, being seen on like a subway or something. And then also in an ad, you sort of like encapsulate the essence of that game very easily, right? And so it's easy to get people to click, and it's easy to get people to install from the App Store page, and it's easy, and therefore because they got all of that along that way, they stick around, and the day one retention's higher. And so those are more inclined to have higher DAU bases, and so you can monetize on ads more easily, right? And so I think, you know, starting from that, you know, perspective, or, you know, if you accept those things to be true, and maybe you don't, maybe you disagree, but if you believe that, then that really dictates kind of what path you take to monetizing the game, and so it dictates how you build an economy. So I think that is really cool to sit with a developer and start from zero and say, okay, what do we want to do? If that, then this, right? If we make this decision, then we make this decision about economy. And there are way fewer prototypes for the sort of really sophisticated, really well done, kind of you know, elegant ad monetization games. You get like these really crappily done things that look like GeoCities pages from the early 90s, right? Like they just have banner ads everywhere, and you know, random pop-ups. There's very few examples of like very, very well done like ad-based monetization games. And the ones that are done really well are like super impressive. So that to me is more exciting. I think that if you go with like the kind of, you know, traditional city builder game, which those are great games, and people have done, you know, made, you know, contributed to the excellent additions to the corpus of games. That's great, but it's just, for me especially, as like helping with that side of design, it's less interesting because it's kind of just going through the motions.
Makes sense. But like when it comes to like the standard argument, I totally agree. It's like beautiful that the rewarded video in specific kind of like helped to really improve the user experience in combination with video or advertising in general. But like one of the main or standardized answers we still get a lot is, so basically I don't want to lose my users. So how do you like within ZeptoLab balance that out? So on the one side, I know that you guys have or work with ads for a long time. So if you can, on the one side, just describe what you've done in the past, what you've learned from it, and what you do nowadays, and how you specifically tackle those challenges, would be great.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, well, first of all, from my perspective, it really depends on like on the type of the game. So there are type of the games which are which could be monetizable only with ads or mostly with ads. So I mean, like if you have like very small like ketchup style game, it's very difficult to monetize it with apps or stuff like that. So we started running ads in our games, I think, like 4 years ago, and like that time it was there were like small banners appearing like everywhere, interstitials, videos, so like so many ad stuff. So users like that time it wasn't really coming to the market. So like at first glance we got some negative feedback from users, and we started to experiment a lot with the ad formats, with the frequency, with the stuff like that. So it was like a long way, and we still experimenting. Like for Cut the Rope, we like finally like we got rid of all the like small banners and all this stuff, because it doesn't make sense and it's not very good for like for the users. So we finally shifted more to direct campaigns, which are much more relevant to the players, and which are which fit better the product you have. So from our side, the biggest thing is like that about the ads. The ads should be relevant for the user. The same conclusion we got like with the King of Thieves. So initially the game was monetizing only with in-app purchases, so there were no ads. But at some point we decided to make some experiments and try like implementing the ads for like recovering the energy. So we tried it, and we see that okay, in-app purchases there were no like drop in the money we got, but we got some extra revenue from ads. Then we started experimenting with different formats. I mean, like we started to experiment like with the ads in different places. And in some places we've seen that ads were really like ruining the monetization of the game. So that was like a long way, but finally we only stuck in like we're only running ads for recovering the energy, and in the shop only for like tier 3 countries where the users are not very likely to pay. So we give them the option to monetize through watching the ads. So this is how we finally got there. And I think, well, just to summarize, I think like ideally the good product and the good monetization is always like a smart mix between in-apps and ads. Because if user like to watch the ads, you should give them the option to do it.
Cool, great. So we already had, like, besides the theory, we already touched base on a couple of examples. But so for what we're now going more and more into the second part, we really want to talk about specific examples you see in the market, and talk about like how basically what made the games that actually ended up on the top of the charts for quite some time in most cases. So in order to kick this off, like to give Daniel like basically the possibility, just take a given vertical, and basically you can name like specific apps, you can name specific developer names, you can also just describe them, and I think we'll have an idea what makes like the combination so unique.
Okay,
Yeah.
now we're on. That's a really general question. I think maybe it makes sense
You can
to
make
pick
it more specific.
I'll take a first step. I'll pick a gaming company, seeing as most people here from the gaming world. And of course, it's very kind of arbitrary in the sense of, I'm actually picking a gaming company that's not a new gaming company, and I don't mind saying the name. I'm not going to share any data. But one company that is very fun to me in any case is Game Circus. Not sure if everyone's heard of them. They're a developer out of Texas in the US. And they have one of, a game, maybe I'll just say the name, Coindozer. Is anyone familiar with that? Has heard of it? Great. So a few. So, we're talking about a small gaming company that has been very successful by really being smart about how they approach user acquisition and data analytics. One of the, when we talk about the evolvement of the ecosystem and new capabilities that are available, this is a company that already from, good couple of years ago have been on the ball with spending money, tracking everything, making the right decisions, and scaling up. I'm not sure what their next steps are going to be, but just touching back on what I mentioned before, I think that one thing people will definitely hear more about and start looking at is going east. Just tying it back into when the bigger advertisers are spending tons of money on channels that are probably now more or less saturated to them, and when they see data points for really, really good conversions by Chinese users, especially in the gaming vertical, it makes sense as a new market to tap. Definitely.
But is there a specific, like, how do those, like, you're now mainly addressing Western companies going east, right? Do they, like, since they coordinate with you on a day-to-day basis, do you see, like, some specific challenges they're facing all the time, and how do you basically get over them? When going east? Exactly. Yes. Again, less part of the conversation with us. It's more about localizing content, translations. It's copyright considerations and protection of copyright for their apps. With China being a very difficult market to get into, really. And also, when we take a step in another conversation that's becoming more predominant in the mobile ecosystem, which is fraud. Then the China, Asia in general are known as hotbeds, so definitely one of the challenges that people consider. Beyond that, there's things like knowing which networks to work with. You've got your global networks, but then you've got local networks in China that know the market probably best at this point in time, whilst it still opens up. Then you have your big networks like Tencent, which owns WeChat and QQ, which coincidentally we're helping people to track campaigns on those channels. But it's really, when you're approaching a new market, I think it's true for any market. In any case, you want to get to know it as well as possible. That means the players, what's going on there, who do we want to start working with, who do we want to test, etc. And so it's the same challenges, but perhaps slightly more challenging than if dealing with a country where you already speak the language. But, Makes sense. Julian, do you have any specific example you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, so in my opinion, the most important part is really collecting a lot of data, trying different strategies to ultimately find out which is the best way to do user acquisition for your specific game. I have one example. It's a wargaming company, and depending on the tank that the users were buying, they could make forecasts for the return on of investment, the lifetime value of the different users, and therefore buy it from the source that is delivering the maximum lifetime value for the different users. And that's really something you can only do if you collect a lot of data, that you know which specific points in my game need to get passed by users that are the most valuable ones for me, right? So one thing is collecting data. The next one is to get the best information out, to really make predictions and forecasts to increase your success and be successful also in the long run.
Cool. So Eric, you mentioned before also like basically your two strategies, either being like throwing like a lot of money, people and money on the topic, or using the brand strategy. For like within the brand realm, there are also like good and bad examples. So where do you basically see like some companies really succeeding, either like to utilize a third party or a first party brand, and why do you think that others are basically miserably failing with it?
Yeah, I'm working with the official Dancing with the Stars game. I'm the CMO of that company that's making that, and we're getting such cheap installs based on that brand. I mean, the IP is it's like it resonates so well on all the channels we run on. We haven't done a ton yet, just because there's like other factors involved, like with the IP holders and the show being on. So we have to be a little bit careful. Once you get into the brand stuff, you unlock a whole different can of worms. I mean, bureaucracy like you've never imagined if you're working with some of these big companies. So that's been a challenge too. But then I look at my kind of power editor dashboard, and it's kind of worth it. I mean, it's a trade-off, but I don't know. That's the thing, because everyone's like, oh, CPIs are going up. CPIs are going up. Well, not really. I mean, if you can, CPIs are going up if you don't have a way to offset CPI price. I mean, that kind of means you have a broken marketing strategy to me. If you do, CPIs are pretty steady. Because demand. I mean, that's the whole thing. I mean, when smartphone penetration was like still kind of growing in the West, then like all this new inventory was being unlocked and people were getting smartphones for the first time and downloading games and stuff. Well, now that's kind of stopped, and so you either go to new markets where that is growing, and that's a challenge in and of itself. And I try to avoid that just because it's a headache that I don't care to burn myself with. Or you realize, I need a way to break through, and that's either I've got a super sophisticated setup where I'm just hyper analytical, or I've got something that sort of like stands above the crowd, right? And Dancing with the Stars definitely achieves that. I mean, I can target. I mean, I only target women of all ages. We've broken it down, and the click-through rates don't really change, and the install rates don't really change, the CPIs don't change. And it's never been more than like 50 cents CPI in the U.S. and iPhone. At reasonably large volume. I mean, this isn't like
Sure.
a million users a day,
but there are like different examples for utilizing a brand, right? And that's like the example you're using here is basically like a game built around a brand, right? More or less. And so, but there are also other strategies where you just like have a given testimonial being basically part of a UA strategy. Is it like something you consider to be valuable, or like examples where you've seen that this actually had like a massive impact?
You mean beyond building a game around a brand?
So just like having a brand, like you have your game, and then you basically start out working with a given testimonial and having it either on the ads, on the App Store icons, etc.
Oh. Yeah, I don't know. I've never really seen that work. Maybe I just not remembering a good case. But I think you've got to. It's got to be baked into the game. I mean, I've seen games where you could tell that it was a finished product, and they just kind of put a logo on it. And I don't know. I can't really think of that working. If I think of some of the biggest branded IP games, talking like Kabam's Marvel Contest of Heroes. That was I think that was a reskin, but. It was well done, and they definitely. It was more than a reskin, but they had a game that existed. Actually, no. Now that I think I'm totally contradicting myself, 'cause the Kardashian game was a reskin. Yeah. Contest of Heroes was a reskin. Okay, maybe you could do it with reskins. I don't know.
Okay, but like when it comes to you guys, the ZeptoLab, is there a specific something in specific you kind of like consider to be impressive what the competitors did there, or something that maybe even like a specific game or feature that you realized that you basically like you saw it with the competitor and you wanted to do it on your own?
Well, for us, I don't think it's the way we want to go. So we already have kind of famous brand on our own, and it's definitely it definitely could help you acquiring more users for a cheaper price if you have like celebrities or stuff like that inside of your game. But on the other hand, it gives you like a lot of like restrictions and you have to pay like royalties, stuff like that. So I don't think that's the way we want to go. We are much more focused on growing our own brand and getting the users from there.
Okay.
But it's not, one thing to point out though, is not necessarily slapping a brand on something and hoping that convinces people to try it. It's also piggybacking on the paid media of the brand holders, right? So that's why I think Dancing with the Stars, it works really well, but we've only been running it during the season. I don't know what happens when the season ends because we've only had the game live for that long. But we see a massive, massive spike in new installs while the show is airing, and we do a lot of, we do spend to coordinate with that too.
So basically more talking about like an integrated strategy, like utilizing all different cross-media formats. Yeah.
Exactly, and that was why I took the project. I wouldn't want to just do it like a random celebrity app. I'd want to do something that was, was able to sort of leverage the paid media that ABC and BBC are doing for this franchise.
Yeah.
And that helps a lot. And again, I mean, I know other companies that are doing these kind of TV show apps, and it spikes up during the show airing. And it spikes up just generally during the season, and then when the season ends, there's definitely a drop. So I mean, that's part of that. You need to consider that.
Cool. So when it comes to do you see something in specific that the companies in the future will need to have in order to really get up there? So now we had the branding experience, even though it seems to be a good strategy to be around for a while, as long as the season is running or the given IP is actually being utilized. But as a general recipe for success for future brands, what do you actually consider to be the main thing moving forward to really stick out and get to top?
That's a very good question, right? That's the secret sauce of the user acquisition business. I really think everybody needs to know
not necessarily. With Pokemon, you'd see that you can also do it without. Okay, so they at least with less UA than some of the other titles.
I mean, that's a factor luck also, right? But I believe you need to find the channels that work for you best, also the countries that work for you best, and you need to try a lot. I think that's always the case, what you need to do, and really be smart in your decisions. Not just throwing money in all different directions. That's, the largest gaming studios can do it like that, but the smaller ones that have a limited budget need to really know and figure out where to invest their user acquisition dollars the best way. And yeah, you need to analyze everything accordingly and then make right decisions, and then you can also still make it nowadays.
That was actually a topic we didn't talk about yet. So when it comes to any kind of re-engagement, is there I expected a lot of guys using AppsFlyer also to basically understand how different re-engagement channels work. Is it something you see heavily being used nowadays, and if so, which?
Increasing all the time.
Increasing all the time.
Yeah, definitely. Last year was probably more people were talking about it than actually doing it. This year I see a lot more activity on that side. I think probably not just me, but the entire industry. It makes sense, right? It's the ability to re-engage with your existing users and hopefully at a cheaper price and get them to reconvert. Takes me onto a slightly connected, but as is always the case, you have, as an advertiser, you have so many partners that you can work with. And so, especially with that increase in re-engagement and retargeting activities, you also see those networks that are a niche in the retargeting direction. Not saying this is a plug for the number of integrated partners we have or anything like that, but obviously when it comes to re-engagement and retargeting, just like it is with UA, you're comparing or trying to compare as close to apples to understand where your money's working best for you. I think with all the considerations, whether it's a brand or not, whether you have some kind of great IP that you can leverage, the battle is pretty much the same, being fought in many different ways, but perhaps what is key upon the whole key of everything, and it's just to build on what Julian said, is the data. Without those insights, you're more or less guessing, and when you're guessing, you're really you might succeed, but you're not giving yourself the best chance.
Okay, but like, how do you do the get the guessing out of the re-engagement campaigns? As in,
Well,
like, how do you measure it?
That's tracking it properly, right? And that's tracking it just like you would a UA campaign. And you know, we say re-engagement or retargeting. It doesn't have to be just a campaign through Facebook or Twitter. It can be, you know, push notifications as a re-engagement strategy or an email promo. And we have and, you know, support, and I think the whole industry expects it, you know, also the tools which help to deliver the right experience to the users that are being re-engaged with, because if you deliver them a bad experience, it's not just that they might not come back, it's they might not come back ever.
Sure.
So in staying with the topic of this, could you go into a little more of the examples about some of the chart-topping games, the modern ones or current ones, and talk about why you think they were particularly successful? I know that, you know, Daniel gave us an example of one, another one, but nothing wrong with those. Those were helpful, but they weren't really current games. So I was wondering if you could look at the current ones in any more detail.
You know, there's a million blog posts deconstructing those. I think if you want to learn about why people think Clash of Clans did well, you know, there's 100 different results on Google. I could tell you. I mean, I don't know. If I knew, I'd be sitting on a mountain of money.
Not that I have a ton of insights, but actually maybe you might have. But like Ketchup, who, you know, a successful French developer that became, you know, without spending a single dollar on UA, right? They just managed to continuously be featured by Apple, get great organic downloads, and now as a studio, we're just recently acquired by Ubisoft, right? I'm looking for confirmation because I'm not sure I'm getting everything right here, but I think that's the case. And you know, who gets to the top is I think a function of so many different things. It can be someone that doesn't spend a dollar, gets featured because they have great mechanics in the game and people love playing them. Then you have the big spenders and you know, even again going back east, but like 10-cent games, which has suddenly, you know, just entered the gaming vertical and is taking the Western market by storm. And that's obviously a massive company which has the ability to spend a lot of money to acquire users, and then all those capabilities of data scientists and massive marketing teams. I think it's very difficult to focus on a specific example and use it as a reference of you know, how other companies can model to succeed.
Maybe to add that one, I think it's also like a question of the right marketing mix, right? So I believe if you run TV campaigns, maybe in combination with video campaigns and a lot of cheap performance campaigns like display advertising, you can also be very successful in a combination of branding and performance combined, but it always depends in the end what material you have in hand, if there's stars involved, if there's a strong brand behind. But yeah, there's not the one right solution and path. It's really trying out, find the right way, and then invest strategically good.
Okay, great. Then I'd like to thank all of you. So I think we definitely had the opportunity to cover like a bunch of different topics. It might be true that some of the big names haven't been dropped aggressively here. So, but I think still like many of the strategies that we discussed here can be applied to the different strategies or what basically made those games great. And therefore, I thank also like all of you for attending our session, and I think the panelists will be here for the next couple of minutes, so if you have any questions, feel free to address them. Thanks so much.
Thank you.